So Gremlins was released in 1984 when I was 4 years old. I didn't get to see it until a couple of years later when I was 6. And this became like a bit of a classic of my childhood. I watched this film like, I don't know, must have been about 50 times when I was a kid with my brothers. We'd all watch it together. We watched it on repeats when we rented it on video. And then when it eventually came to TV, we recorded it and then we watched it again and again. Now, a few years after this, Critters came out, which I actually enjoyed more. I'm still more of a fan of Critters. But yeah, a lot of the shine on this film has worn off over the years. Now, you should know the story of Gremlins by now. You know, this kid gets, well, say kid, he's a teenager, late teenager. He gets bought this thing called a mogwai. And if you break the 3 rules, i.e. you get it wet, or you feed it after midnight, or you let it go in sunlight, then bad stuff starts to happen. Of course, this mogwai does get wet, and then all these gremlins are unleashed. That's essentially the story. Now, the setup for it, I think, is absolutely brilliant. I think the first 40 minutes or so of this film are really good, with one flaw, one niggle, one thing that really gets on my nerves, which is the whole rule about feeding them after midnight. Precisely how long do you have after midnight? Because technically any hour in the day is after midnight. And we do see at one point that it's about 20 past 2 in the morning when one of these things gets fed and he still becomes a gremlin. So, yeah, a bit more rules should have been established there. And you kind of feel in some ways these rules were kind of half-assedly done in many ways, because at the beginning of the film, when we first get told these rules from the kid, the way that it's filmed, the way that it's edited, I should say, is really piecemeal. Like the father buys the mogwai from this kid, and then he starts to walk off, and then in voiceover we hear this kid telling the father these rules, and it's, well, like, at what point did he tell him those rules? Did he call him back and say, oh, by the way, I forgot? It's just, yeah, there's moments like that with the editing that, to me, as an adult, I notice. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't. These things just didn't matter. And that's the difference, I think. That's the thing with this film. I think for children, it works. And if you are an adult who feeds on nostalgia, then I think this film is still going to work for you. For me, not so much. I'm not that kind of nostalgic. When I go back and I revisit things from my childhood, I look at them through my adult eyes. And if they don't add up anymore, if they don't quite work the way they did when I was a kid, I have to say so, and this doesn't. Like I say, besides that rule that just, like I say, is a bit kind of wishy-washy, a bit not really thought out, you know, just one line of dialogue or one word would have kind of made that improved vastly. But there is that, yeah. But besides that, within the first hour, 40 minutes to an hour, it's a really great film with moments of genuine horror. You know, it's kind of geared as a sort of family horror, like a horror that almost kids can be brought in on. I mean, I watched it as a kid, as many other kids did, and I think that was intended. There's certainly a lot of humour in this, and a lot of that humour, for me, again, doesn't work because there's no logic to it. Like, these gremlins kind of just do stuff, and they become highly educated far too quickly. You know, being able to drive vehicles, being able to know exactly where you need to go to cut a phone wire in order to cancel someone's call, knowing exactly where to cut the brake pipe on a car. It's like they just know this stuff naturally. It just, you know, that's that. No explanation or anything. You know, they go to watch a film at the cinema, and they, you know, I was a projectionist. I had to be trained on that thing, and believe me, it was complicated. When you were dealing with 35mm, it was complicated. And these gremlins with no training, and as you can see on screen, because they're like completely making a pig's ear of it, films going everywhere, yet somehow they managed to get the film on screen. And I know this is not the kind of thing that should be getting criticised, I guess, in a film like this, because when I was a kid, I didn't notice that stuff. I didn't care about that stuff. So if you are a kid, you are going to find this entertaining. For me, Certainly as a former projectionist, I look at that stuff and it just rubs me the wrong way. The humour doesn't quite work for me. It is still an entertaining film. You know, some of it does work, and the ideas behind the film are still very solid. You know, the whole concept of the Gremlins, I think, is a really solid idea. And there's a moment with Billy's mum when she first sees these Gremlins in a kitchen, and she goes on the attack. And she blends one up in a blender. She stabs one repeatedly with a knife, and then she throws one in the microwave, and we see it explode. And it's just like, you're watching this and you're thinking, my goodness, this is really hardcore stuff. So, you know, scenes like that are kind of like, yeah, that's pretty impressive. It's entertaining. I'd have liked more stuff like that. In fact, I'd have preferred it if they'd have played it darker like that throughout, rather than trying to go for the comedy angle. And there's a moment in this film when this girl that Billy is trying to woo tells this story, and it's a story that as a child it always haunted me when I watched this film. I think I've said this on my channel before, when she talks about her father and how he died, and it is a genuinely haunting story. But it was to me anyway as a kid, but now when I watch it, the pacing of it just feels totally off. Like, she gets into this story really, really quickly. Like, you know, stuff breaks out, and then all of a sudden she's telling Billy this story. And I would have liked a little bit of, I don't know, a bit of sit down with those two first. A little bit of a, I don't know. It just comes and it's boom. I'm going to tell you my past tragedies, and yeah, it doesn't quite have the same effect on me as an adult. It's still a tragic story, and it's still a brilliant character moment. I just think it could have been handled better with regards to pacing. So, yeah, you know, it is an entertaining film. It's got some wonderful ideas in it. It's brilliantly set up. I just think it's not quite at the level that I guess most people rate it as, and I think that's largely to do with nostalgia. You know, if I was reviewing this through my child eyes when I saw this as a kid, this would be getting a 5 out of 5, because as I say, I watched this constantly. I loved it, but I watch it now and there's just too many things wrong with it to truly call it a classic. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 because I do still think it's a good film. I just think it would be ignorant of me to not notice the things that are wrong with it. But what about you? What do you think? Comment below, let me know, and until tomorrow, thanks for watching.